Sport and politics clash at the Olympics. A Belarusian athlete in Tokyo seeks protection from Poland, saying she was forced to leave the Games against her will. So what does her case say about repression and human rights in her homeland? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Hazem, Sika. Krystina Tsimanouskaya went to the Tokyo Olympics with dreams of representing Belarus at the world's biggest sporting event. But the dramatic end to her campaign has triggered a political and diplomatic dispute. The sprinter says Belarusian officials tried to force her to fly home when she complained about being entered into a race she hadn't prepared for. After seeking the protection of Japanese police at the airport, she then found refuge at the Polish embassy in Tokyo and was given a humanitarian visa. The Belarusian Olympic Committee says it pulled Simunskaya from competition because of her psychological state. But the athlete says her life was in danger.
They made it clear that upon my return home, I would definitely face some form of punishment, and that if I refused and ran in the 200-meter race, I would be fired and kicked out of the national team. There were also thinly disguised hints that more would await me. The key phrase was when they said that the decision to return home was not taken by us. It was taken by other people, and we were ordered to follow through. At the moment, I just want to safely get to Europe. I would really like to continue my sporting career because I'm only 24 and I had plans to participate in at least 2 more Olympic Games.
Well, the International Olympic Committee wants answers from Belarusian officials and has launched a formal investigation.
In terms of her safety and security, I think we've dealt with most of the issues that needed to be dealt with. We have decided to launch, not surprisingly, a formal investigation, which will be led by the IOC administration. We need to establish the full facts. We need to hear everyone involved. That obviously can take time. And in the meantime, obviously, our first concern is for the athlete.
Well, as the athlete's case unfolded in Tokyo, in Ukraine, a Belarusian activist was found dead in a park. Vitaly Shishov led an organization in Kiev which helped Belarusians fleeing persecution. Police have launched a murder investigation. Exiled opposition leader Svetlana Tikhanovskaya fears something similar could happen to her.
You know, everybody who is in Belarus and who are in exile have to take care about themselves, because we see that regime maybe will not stop from anything to reach if they want to do something. I can disappear at any moment, I understand this, but I should do what I'm doing. I can't stop because I'm you know, I feel this responsibility for the future of my country, the same as all those Belarusians who are fighting at the moment feel their responsibility. But I know that even if I disappear one day, this movement will continue without me.
Belarusian government's crackdown on dissent has worsened since President Alexander Lukashenko was re-elected last August. Thousands of protesters were arrested, including several linked to Svetlana Tikhanovskaya's campaign. She fled to neighboring Lithuania and has been drumming up international pressure on Lukashenko to step down. In May, a Ryanair flight heading to Lithuania was forcibly diverted to Minsk, where police detained an opposition journalist on board. Roman Protasevich is accused of being involved in so-called terrorist activity. And last month, Belarusian police raided the offices of 14 rights groups, non-governmental organizations and independent media outlets. Well, let's bring in our guests now. Joining us from Warsaw is Anatol Kotau, International Relations Manager of the Belarusian Sports Solidarity Foundation. The organization helps athletes who faced repercussions for expressing political views. In Brussels, we have Karel, Lannoo, Chief Executive of the Center for European Policy Studies. And also in Warsaw, Valery Tsepkalo, a Belarusian opposition leader and former presidential candidate. A warm welcome to all of you. Anatol, if I could start with you then first, because I know that you have spoken to Kristina Timonovskaya. So just fill us in, first of all, what has she told you about all this?
Actually, now she's okay. Now she's at the Polish embassy in Tokyo, and she's getting better after all these shocking events which turned out of the sudden for her from similar and very simple mistake of team officials who failed to ensure doping testing program for the team members of the mixed or the relay event for X400 meters women. They tried to persuade Kristina to participate in this event, but it's not her discipline. There was no any politics at the beginning of this story. She just refused for reasonable grounds that she won't risk her health and life for somebody's mistakes. And all of a sudden, the political decision was taken in Minsk to grab her and take her back to Minsk against her will. She informed about such a situation. She managed to inform Belarusian Sports Solidarity Foundation.
Valery, Tsepkalo, what do you fear is likely to happen to her family as a result of this?
Well, as far as I understand, her husband already left Belarus. He is in Kiev in Ukraine. I just wanted to say that he is safe now in Kiev in Ukraine. However, we know the story about Vitaly Shishov, that he was found dead just several hours ago. He was hanged in the forest near Kiev. So most probably it was also the results of the actions of Belarus special forces or somebody who cooperates with them in Ukraine. So I don't think that somehow they can influence their parents. However, we had the news that they already approached their parents, probably trying to persuade them, and then therefore Kristina should return back to Minsk. You know that they captured several peoples and they started to speak on camera that everything is fine, the regime is good, we have nothing to worry about in Belarus. That happened when Lukashenko's regime hijacked an aircraft and they brought Roman Protasevich to prison and he started to speak what they wanted. And the same thing happened with one of our athletes, MMA champion, also appeared to be in their hands, and he also started to speak what they wanted from him to talk about. So, I think that the regime wants now the same Kristina would be started to speak about good things about them, but nobody trusts them anymore. And what I expect that most probably the decision will be taken to expel the Belarus National Olympic Committee from the International Olympic Committee, and the Belarus team will continue to participate under the neutral flag in this Olympics.
Karel, Lannoo, given what Belarus has done to previous dissenters, did this surprise you at all?
No, not at all. It's totally in line with the expectations of what this Lukashenko government is doing. I mean, it's even sometimes Lukashenko and his government are even sometimes ahead of the other states. Like, for example, at some stage, they had a row with Latvia, the neighboring country, and they called back their ambassador just because the Latvian embassy over there had put on a flag of the opposition. And they called back the ambassador. I mean, the EU was late to react to that. And it's only on the 24th of May that we, say, after the interception of that plane from Athens, let's say the Ryanair flight, let's say that the EU imposed even harder sanctions. But we have argued in a piece which we published about a month ago that the EU could do much more and, for example, recall all its diplomats and just freeze diplomatic relations entirely with Belarus. But I think there are further things we can do. For example, extending the group of people to which sanctions apply. At the moment, it's about 166 persons. You could say that is a lot. And their assets are frozen, for example. If these people have money on bank accounts in European countries, the assets are frozen. But I think we can do much more than that to be much more restrictive and to be much more forceful against this government.
Anatol Kotau, what has Simunskaya told you and your organization about her long-term plans right now, what she plans to do from here?
Actually, tomorrow she comes to Warsaw, and we are planning to arrange a special meeting for her at the Ministry of Sports and Tourism, the analogous in Poland. They promised to try to meet her requests because she wants to continue her sports career. This is quite possible, and we are ready to help, to assist with facilitation of negotiation with Polish officials and also Polish NOC and late athletics federation. So her main intention to come to a safe place, to reunion with her family, because her husband also had to leave the country because he was afraid of also repressions from the side of authorities. And then to start thinking about future plans within her career. She told us today that she has plans for 2 next Olympics. So she is quite young and prospective athlete, and we would like to help her, to assist her to be prepared for that event, because the main thing here is her fate, her life, and her career.
Valery, Tsepkalo, to what extent has Timonovskaya's case exposed the tactics of the Belarusian regime under Lukashenko?
Well, that's a good question. I would say a couple of words about the symptoms of this power. Just before the collapse, right before the collapse of the Soviet Union, we also know that Belarus sport delegations, they were accompanied by KGB guys, and they were looking after sportsmen, so they didn't allow them to be in contact with the representatives of other states. So they were afraid that these people would leave the country or would leave the sport team, and therefore it would be a big, a bad thing for the reputation of the country. That's what the Soviet Union was afraid of. And we remember Rudolf Nureyev, who fled, in fact, in Paris. I believe he left the Soviet delegation and stayed in France at that time. So I think that the same symptoms actually now we can see in Belarus also, that we are on the brink of a collapse of this regime. And when even sportsmen that are very welcome and they are kind of proud of this regime, they want to use sports definitely in politics. And if even sportmen or sportwomen decided to stay away from this country, I think it's very, very symptomatic, and it's a kind of a hint that this regime would be ended very soon.
Karel, Lannoo, how should the EU react to this now? And I know you kind of touched on this a little earlier, and part of the reason I'm asking is because when Roman Protasevich, the opposition journalist, was taken off that Ryanair flight earlier this year, there was this storm of criticism internationally, and the EU almost immediately imposed economic sanctions on Belarus. But clearly it hasn't changed their behavior, has it? So what do they do now?
I mean, of course, they have, as I said, let's say, reinforced the sanctions, but I think they can do much more, as I just said, let's say, at the diplomatic level, they can do much more. There is another thing which I wanted to highlight, which this murder or alleged murder of this journalist in Ukraine underlines. I mean, the secret police, be it the KGB or the secret police of Belarus, is possibly present almost everywhere. So as long as we have these diplomatic relations under the cover of diplomats, secret police can be active in all European countries to follow, let's say, whatever Belarusians are doing on our territory and eventually kidnap them, like Russia is also used to do, for example, in the Baltic states. So if we are much more forceful, let's say, trying to trace what these different, diplomats, so-called diplomats are doing in the different European Union countries, or eventually freeze diplomatic relations with the country in question, we can be much more forceful and make sure that these things do not happen anymore or happen less. Anyway, there's so much parallel between the way the Belarusian government acts and the way the Russian government, for example, has acted in the cases of this poisoning of these opposition figures in the UK. What Belarus is doing is of the same kind. However, I would warn against too much kind of optimism or hope, let's say, that these things will have rapid effects. I'm very happy to see that the elected president of Belarusia, Timonovskaya, is received everywhere around the world, was received by Biden last week, is now in California, where I remember correctly was in Ireland before. She gets good support, but we will have to continue to do this eventually for years to undermine this regime as soon as we can. But I would say, I think it may last years because Russia is behind Belarusia and Russia is strongly supporting, or Putin is strongly supporting the Belarusian regime. And we've seen in Syria how this can turn around. In the case of Syria, we thought 10 years ago that Assad would be forced to step down very soon. But look where we are today. Assad is again and is still there.
All right, we'll come back to some of that in a moment, but I just want to come back to Anatol for a moment. Should the relevant sporting authorities have done more to help Simunovskaya? This all happened very quickly, and the Court of Arbitration in sport denied her legal bid to run in the 200 meters in the Olympics earlier this week, saying that she didn't have enough evidence to make her case for that. What do you take from that? Was there perhaps a reluctance to get involved in a political and diplomatic dispute?
Actually, we saw a good level of engagement of European Olympic committees and international Olympic committees, who had really not so much time to respond, but they interfered immediately, just 1 hour after they have been informed about the case of Kristina Timonovskaya. Unfortunately, the Belarusian delegation tried to do it like a special operation. So after Kristina was informed that she has to go to airport just 1 hour before she was actually taken from her apartment. So they planned this action with no time to respond. If we speak about International Court of Sports Arbitration ad hoc division at Tokyo, they did not dismiss the appeal of Timonovskaya. They dismissed only one part of the appeal, a request for stay. And the case is still under consideration of the court, and we would like to have a final decision. Just to point out, just to fix officially that there was a fact of violation of her rights and that she was eager to participate in this event. Of course, such a system, as we see on this example, should really be working 24 hours, 7 days, for sure. Unfortunately, due to these differences in time shifts, and also due to complexity of the situation, Kristina was in police with limited access for communication means. So there should be some more efficient, urgent remedies elaborated, taking into account this case. But everything what could have been done by the international sports authorities was actually done, and we are grateful for their interference and help. International Olympic Committee opened a new investigation against the National Olympic Committee of Belarus to investigate thoroughly Kristina Timonovskaya case.
Valery, Tsepkalo, how would you characterize the current climate in Belarus right now in terms of free speech? Has it gotten worse since that disputed election in August 2020?
Definitely much worse, because the political parties are banned. Practically all newspapers, independent newspapers, even local newspapers, even very, very small newspapers that cover the life of some local communities, they are also banned. Practically there are no NGOs now in Belarus, and it's a really very visible crackdown from the side of this regime on the civil society. And Lukashenko would try to clear the field, that it would be no any attempt for resistance, even peaceful demonstrations. All the peaceful demonstrations are also not allowed. So I think that the situation with human rights is getting worse and worse. We have now about 600 officially recognized political detainees in our country, and the number of administrative arrests are rising also. So just that they were about 40,000 people that got through prisons after these presidential elections. 40,000. If you can compare with the Polish Solidarność, the largest in Central and Eastern Europe after the Second World War, that in Poland they were about 10,000 people got through prisons, and Poland is 4 times bigger than Belarus. So you can imagine the scale of the terror that Belarus civil society faces now from the side of this regime. But from another point, we are pretty optimistic, because one day it will blow up, and there are no other way but we will definitely win, because it's impossible now to breathe, but the society cannot live the same way, and I'm pretty confident that we are on the brink of the end of this regime.
Let's give what's probably going to be the last word on this to Karel, Lannoo. Do you agree with that sentiment? Are you hopeful for the future? And what would you want to see more of from other nations in applying pressure on Belarus?
I'm hopeful as well, but we shouldn't be kind of too, optimistic in the sense that it will just be a matter of some weeks. No, it can still take some time, but we have to be extremely resolved, very clear that in what we do and what we support. And I think this is not only the case for all EU countries, it's also the case for all European countries, for all the countries in the Western world, that we have to be, or in the world as a whole, have to be very supportive, let's say, of the elected presidential candidate, this Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. Anyway, she's received all over the world, she's traveling all over, but that we have to continue to have the pressure, because if we give up the pressure, Lukashenko will say, I won, and he will stay on in power for another 10 years, which is also likely. So that is extremely important, let's say, the resolve of all the different countries, and increase our sanctions, reduce diplomatic presence, eventually be much more forceful on eventual activities of the secret police, of the KGB and others in our countries, but also of other Belarusians who have some links with the government, who are having links over here, or think, for example, look at bank accounts which Belarusians have in European countries, or look at, for example, at their relatives who are studying in European universities, which is also happening in case that on that, if they are tough against the relatives, for example, of this athlete of Belarus, we have to be very forceful against the relatives of those which are part of the Lukashenko gang. And that we can do much more strongly, let's say, than we're doing already today. Of course, we have strengthened our actions, but we have to do much more just to show that we are not giving up and supporting who is the person who's democratically elected, and that we want to have a change in that government.
All right. We'll have to leave it there. Good discussion. Thanks very much. Gentlemen, thanks for being on Inside Story. Anatol, Kotau, Karel, Lannoo, and Valery Tsepkalo. Thanks for being with us. And thank you for watching. As always, remember you can see the program again anytime by visiting our website at jazeera.com. And for further discussion, you can go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle there is @AJ Inside Story. For me, Hazem, Sika, and the whole team here, bye for now.